I didn't think much of him at first, until I realized he was the only person in the neighborhood who never looked rushed. And for some reason, that started to bother me. I used to wake up at 7:30 every morning, already behind. The alarm would go off and I'd lie there for a few seconds, staring at the ceiling, doing that quick mental math. How much time I had left, what I could skip, what I'd be late for. Most mornings, I chose speed over calm. Quick shower, coffee in a travel mug, emails while tying my shoes. It felt normal. Everyone I knew lived like that. I worked a standard office job downtown. Nothing unusual. Meetings, deadlines, constant notifications. My days were structured, efficient, and somehow still chaotic. By the time I got home, I was mentally drained but restless at the same time. Like I had done a lot, but not anything that actually mattered. I remember thinking, this is just how adult life works. That belief stayed unchallenged until I started noticing him. He lived 2 houses down from mine, an older man, probably in his late 70s. I had seen him before, of course, but only in passing. He wasn't the kind of person who stood out. No loud personality, no obvious quirks, just steady. The first time I really noticed him was on a Tuesday morning. I had woken up earlier than usual. Some work anxiety had pulled me out of sleep around 5:30. I couldn't fall back asleep, so I got up, made coffee, and stood by the window. That's when I saw him. He stepped out of his house at exactly 6 a.m. Not rushed, not slow either, just deliberate. He walked down his driveway, paused for a moment, and looked up at the sky. Not like someone checking the weather. It was different, like he was actually seeing it. Then he sat on the small wooden bench near his porch and did nothing. No phone, no newspaper, no coffee in his hand. Just sitting there. At first, I thought maybe he was waiting for someone, but no one came. 10 minutes passed, then 15. I remember feeling slightly uncomfortable watching him, like I was witnessing something I didn't quite understand. Eventually, I left for work and forgot about it. But the next morning, it happened again. Same time, same routine. Step outside, look up, sit. And again the next day, and the next. At some point, it stopped feeling like coincidence and started feeling like a pattern I couldn't ignore. There was something about it that didn't sit right with me. Not in a bad way, just unfamiliar. I remember thinking, how can someone just sit there like that? Doesn't he have anything to do? That question lingered longer than I expected. A week later, curiosity got the better of me. I set my alarm for 5:45. When it went off, I almost turned it off and went back to sleep, but something pulled me up. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe it was that quiet discomfort I couldn't explain. I made coffee, stepped outside, and tried to act like I had a reason to be there. At exactly 6 a.m., his door opened. He noticed me immediately. There was no surprise in his expression, just a small nod like he expected this moment somehow. "Morning," he said. "Morning," I replied, trying to sound casual. We stood there for a few seconds in silence. Then he walked to his bench and sat down, just like always. I hesitated, then walked a little closer. "Do you do this every day?" I asked. He looked at me, not confused, not defensive. "What do you do?" "This," I said, gesturing vaguely. "Just sit." He smiled slightly. "Yeah, every morning," he said. I nodded, but I didn't know what to say next. There was a pause. Then he asked, "You ever tried it?" I laughed a little. "Not really. I mean, I usually don't have time." He didn't respond right away. He just looked at me for a second longer than most people would. Then he said, "You might." That was it. No explanation, no advice, just "you might." For some reason, that response stayed with me the entire day. It wasn't what he said, it was how simple it was. Like he wasn't trying to convince me of anything. That night, I kept thinking about it. You might. It felt like he knew something I didn't. The next morning, I woke up early again. Not because I had to, just because I wanted to see if it would feel different. I stepped outside. He was already there. This time, I didn't stand awkwardly. I walked over and sat on the edge of the bench, leaving some space between us. We didn't talk. At first, it felt strange. My mind immediately started racing. Things I had to do, emails I needed to send, random thoughts that usually filled my mornings. I kept checking the time on my phone. 3 minutes had passed. It felt like 10. I remember thinking, this is pointless, but I stayed. A few more minutes passed. Something shifted. Not dramatically, just slightly. The thoughts didn't disappear, but they slowed down. I noticed the air felt cooler than I expected. There was a faint sound of birds somewhere in the distance. A car passed by, but it didn't feel intrusive. For the first time in a long while, nothing was demanding my attention, and that felt unfamiliar. After about 15 minutes, he stood up. "Have a good day," he said. "You too," I replied, and that was it. No deep conversation, no life advice, but something about that morning stayed with me more than any productive day I had in weeks. So I kept going. Not every day, but often enough. Each time it felt a little less uncomfortable. I stopped checking my phone as much. I stopped trying to use the time. I just sat. One morning, after a couple of weeks, I finally asked him something that had been on my mind. "Why do you do this?" I said. He didn't answer immediately. He looked out at the street, then up at the sky, like he was choosing his words carefully. "Because I didn't used to," he said. I frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I spent most of my life in a hurry. Always something to get to, always something more important waiting." I nodded. That sounded familiar. I thought being busy meant I was doing something right. Felt productive, useful. He paused. Then one day, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd actually noticed anything. That sentence hit me harder than I expected. He looked at me not in a dramatic way, just honestly. I had done a lot, but I hadn't really been there for most of it. There was no sadness in his voice, just clarity. I didn't know what to say, so I stayed quiet. That morning felt different, not because something big happened, but because something small finally made sense. Over the next few days, I started noticing things I hadn't before, not just in the mornings. During the day, I caught myself rushing through conversations, thinking about the next thing before the current one was even finished. I noticed how often I filled silence with my phone, how quickly I dismissed moments that didn't seem useful. It wasn't a sudden transformation, but it was enough to make me pause. One evening, after a long day at work, I sat in my car outside my house for a few minutes before going in. No reason, I just sat there. And for the first time, it didn't feel like wasted time. It felt intentional. The next morning, I told him that. He nodded. "That's how it starts," he said. "Starts what?" I asked. "Paying attention," he replied. That phrase stuck with me. Not being more productive, not managing time better, just paying attention. I started to understand something I hadn't before. It wasn't about waking up early. It wasn't about routines or discipline. It was about noticing the parts of life we usually skip, the quiet ones, the ones that don't seem important until you realize they're the only moments you actually experience. A few weeks later, I overslept. My alarm didn't go off and I rushed out of the house like I used to. As I drove away, I glanced at his house. He was sitting there, just like always, unbothered, present. And for a second, I felt that old rush again, that sense of being behind. But it faded quicker this time, because I knew something I didn't before. I knew I could choose differently. That evening, I went to bed a little earlier, not because I had to, but because I wanted that quiet time back, that space where nothing was expected of me, that place where I could just be. I still have busy days. I still get caught up in work, in deadlines, and all the usual things. But now there's a small part of my day that feels different, more grounded, more real. And it started with something I almost dismissed as pointless. Sometimes I think about how easily I could have ignored him, how I almost did. Just another neighbor, just another routine. But instead, it became something else, something I didn't know I needed. And now, every once in a while, I catch myself doing the same thing he did that first morning, stepping outside, looking up, sitting down, not waiting for anything, not trying to accomplish anything, just noticing. And it makes me wonder, how much of our lives do we spend rushing through without ever really being there for them?